I'll just kind of rephrase the question. Talking about Detroit in the early, mid-60s, a really, really pivotal civil rights era. What did it feel like living there, and what were the interracial perceptions and interactions that you had living there?
In Detroit?
Yes, in Detroit.
Well, it was a difficult time. Reformation was in basically two contexts. We were in Detroit, and we were, 4 or 6 blocks from the Grosse Points, very affluent communities.
Okay.
So we were kind of pulled in two directions. I was an assistant pastor to Calvin Stickles, who was a wonderful mentor. The congregation was basically affluent, Caucasian people. No parking, basically, except on the streets. But Cal was such a wonderful pastor, I'm just going to say pastor, that people came basically from the suburbs, the Grosse Points, and the city. He was just a wonderful mentor. We started, as I said, in Lakeview, went to Lakewood, and Cal said, "If you will stay, I will retire." And so I said, that's the best reason for me to leave. Because he was still, 60-ish? Had a lot of good life in him.
He was pastor of the same congregation for his whole ministry.
Oh, okay.
Which is
48 years.
Very unusual.
Oh, my. And what about I understand that there weren't too many black or other racial minorities in your church.
No.
But what about when you would go out on the street and go into Detroit? What were the interactions like during those years?
The area where we lived was middle class white.
Right.
And so we really didn't run into black people and going shopping or anything.
Okay. Kind of like Upper Arlington today.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Not exactly. I think it was
Well,
more a working class neighborhood.
Well, not
Okay.
that way, but I mean in terms
But
of...
racially.
The racial
Racial.
Okay,
yeah.
I see. So, but I do know that you've mentioned before, Pastor Dave, that you had a couple of families of color who did come to your church, and then
That was in Flint.
that was in okay. Pardon me. Okay, we'll get there.
Oh, that's all right.
We'll get there. Am I correct then that it would have been during your time in Detroit that you were involved in the March on Washington?
Yes.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about your thinking, how you decided to go to that march, both of you? You both went, correct?
No.
No, okay.
I stayed home with the
All right, so
children.
this is for you then, Pastor Dave.
Okay.
Kind of your thinking, how you decided to go, and what do you remember from that day?
Okay, you started reading books. That's where it started.
With a good friend, actually, the spouse of a good friend of ours. And so we kept exchanging these books on how to relate, I don't even like the term interracially, but black and white, and begin to understand each other, work together in various ministries as much as we could.
He read James Baldwin.
Right.
He read
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
Other books like that got him.
So you would read these books and talk about them together?
Yes.
Was this also, did you say a pastor friend?
I don't think it was a general pastor thing, but basically one-to-one dialogue.
Okay.
Sometimes 2-to-2, but that wasn't the time when this was a topic of conversation.
And how did these books shape your thinking?
I think it just moved me further along the way. As I said earlier, I think that working in my dad's foundry, there were black workers there, and I found that I was very comfortable with them. Color of skin doesn't make that much difference on what's inside of you. And then the big thing, as I said, was marching into Washington and being called, the word and lover, finding that was not an insult, but an affirmation of who I am and what I'm about.
Let's step back a little bit though. So how did you hear about and how did you decide to go in the march in Washington? And did you do this without other people knowing, or did you do it as a public pastor? Just talk to me a little bit about that.
I don't think I hid it from anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I know I didn't. Afterwards, it was a conversation, a controversial conversation. How come you could go do that?
Why
Who was
didn't
asking?
you? He said, why didn't you go?
Who was asking this?
Oh, was that
Member of the church.
Bob
Okay.
McKay?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You're always talking about loving your neighbors and caring about other people. Why weren't you there? And the answer, of course, was, I was. And as a pastor, you're called to preach, teach, counsel, do all the jobs, but you're not called to be dominated by the parishioners, but to live your own life, to have a wonderful wife, a family that cares for you and you care for your family. And we have never, I don't think, well, I guess we lived in technically what were parsonages, but there were never ones where people would come in and, well, Carl Walter would, but to fix things, not to inspect us and see if we were behaving ourselves. So we were very fortunate.
How do both of you remember hearing that this was going to happen? And what went through your minds in deciding that you would go to this? Because I'm sure this wasn't quite a low-risk thing to do.
Did you find out about it from Joe Melton?
Yes, the Roman Catholic associate pastor, as I was an associate pastor at Reformation, we had regular conversation, got together about once a week to think about what the church is, to study scripture, pray together, and ultimately I officiated Joe's wedding to a former nun.
This is the Catholic priest you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that was a big deal then. I don't know if it's a big deal now, but
When he and Joe became friends, our senior pastor at Reformation and his senior priest had never met. And they'd been there for 35 years or 40 years. Yeah. So this was something new.
Did you two go together to the march?
yes, Joe Melton and I did.
How did you get there?
DC3.
No, you're
Oh, is
getting
that
mixed up. You got on a bus to go to Washington.
Oh, that one, yeah.
And that was Clay Reeson that you went with.
Right.
Our
Our
Good
friend's
friends.
associate pastor.
Okay. And so you got there on the bus,
Right.
and can you remember, what do you remember about the day?
What did I tell you? I don't remember.
You said you walked from
Right.
the bus and you went to the Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, and of course they said, get off the
No,
sidewalk.
that was different.
Oh, that's what was,
Okay, I don't think they did that there.
well, I think they
That was
did.
in Selma.
And we'll get to Selma. We'll be
Okay.
getting there.
But you were with how many people? 250,000
A
people,
lot of
they
people.
said. And what kind of people were there? Was it all the same?
No, black and white, gay and straight, male and female, you name it. Clergy and laity, Roman Catholic, Lutheran, Episcopalian, Jewish, Christian, any variety of people you can think of. You know, a lot of people. Would you say 250,000? I believe it.
Do you remember if you wore your clerical color when you
I
were there?
believe I did.
You did. Okay. So you knew you were representing not just yourself.
No.
Yeah.
Was there any controversy at all in the Lutheran Church or from other pastors when you did this, either before or after?
What would
Yeah.
you say? What did Bob Shaner say to his assistant?
Well, you should have been there. Oh, to Clay Reason.
Yeah.
If you go, you may not have a job when you get back.
Who is Bob Shaner? Let's step
Bob
back.
Shannon was our dear friend. Actually, we're each sponsors of each other's children in baptism,
Okay.
and so we're very close friends.
He was a pastor at a local
Holy
church.
Community.
So a fellow Lutheran pastor.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Was he in a position to hire or fire you, or what
No,
did he
he
mean
was
by
just
that?
a pastor in his local congregation.
Okay. So was he saying it out of concern for you, saying, think about what you're doing, or what was the basis of a statement like that?
What would you say?
It's his wife who was reading all the
Oh,
books
Donna.
and sharing books with Dave, and
Okay.
he was not on the same page.
No, not at that
He
point.
was
Okay.
not involved
Okay.
in racial support.
Okay, okay. So I would like to actually jump up a couple of years because I believe the march in Washington was 1963, and then.
Yeah, that's right.
And then,
Can I just say one thing?
yes, please.
But we were talking about Bob and his wife, but when Clay came back, that was a turning point in Bob's life because he realized what was going on, and it turned him around, and he started dealing with racial issues and racial injustice or justice with his congregation after that. And so he was starting to read all the books and get involved as well. So it was a turning point in his life too.
I'm going to ask you a question that isn't on here. And again, this is for both of you, but maybe especially for you, Marge, since you stayed home. Your children were very young at that time. How did you explain what their dad was doing? And did they have questions about this as they got older?
I don't know that they were that involved. I was watching, and the tears were coming down my eyes because I was so proud of him being there, being part of such a big thing. But I think they were a little too young. They were 2 and 4,
Yeah,
I think, or
that's
something
right.
like that.
When you say you were watching, was this televised?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I didn't know. I mean, I knew obviously that they had live televising back then, but I didn't know on a national scale how much attention it got.
Big deal.
I wasn't alive then, so.
That's right.
When President Kennedy we watched that all the way through. I mean, we turned it on. Our neighbor called and said that he'd been shot, and the TV was on for 2-3 days.
But of course, this was after. The march came first, and then it was several months later that Kennedy was shot, right?
Yeah.
That's true.
Just to clarify
Right.
that, yeah, the timeline for posterity in 200 years when they watch this.
Right.
Let's move forward a little bit, a couple of years to, I understand that you were also involved going down to the south, to Selma. Again, was that both of you, or was that only you, Pastor Dave?
I think it was just myself.
Okay.
She was home with the children.
Yeah, I understand. Talk to me a little bit more about that. What you remember and how you decided to do that, and what you did do while you were there.
Well, we tried to register. Basically, we went down because some things are crystal clear. He that is not with me is against me, and so we felt very strongly that this is a time to register black voters so that there could be some equality of power. It wouldn't be full, so white people would be the dominant force, but black people would have at least representation. So we went down basically to register black voters. However, is that when Viola Liuzzo was murdered, and Dr. King said, I remember being in this rather large Baptist church, I guess it was an African-dominated black church, and Dr. King said, one life is too many, and I want you to go home. I know that you came to register voters. We appreciate that very much. I know that you put your life on the line so that more black people could vote. But I want you to go home. I'm begging you to go home. We're not here to create violence. We're here to spread peace. And we didn't want to come home, but he said, he almost begged us, please go home. And of course we did.
But when you first got down there, did they take you to just outside of Montgomery, and you joined the march?
Right.
I think the march started a couple of days earlier.
Right.
From Selma. It was a long way, and they camped along the way. But the group Dave was with joined the march just outside of Montgomery, and then they walked across the bridge and all the way to the Capitol. And that's when they gave a bill to the governor for voting rights for the black people.
Pastor Dave, when you say we, and you mentioned Marge, a group, who did you go with?
Who were we with?
A group of 23 Catholics.
Yeah. Oh, I'm flying down. Yeah, we were
Okay.
23 Roman Catholics.
laity or priests, or who were they?
I think it was mostly priests and nuns,
Okay.
but I think there was some laity involved. I think there were just 24 of us in that plane.
Okay.
So many of us didn't have very good stomachs
Wow.
at that point. So,
So when Martin Luther King Jr. asked you to leave, then you say you did. You did leave after that. Were you witness to any of the violence that happened going across the bridge?
yes, yeah, there were. I think it was Ku Klux Klan. Had clubs and they were indiscriminate. They would pound the stuff on white and black people, male and female, Jew and Gentile, you name it. If you're here, you're a bad person. And they had little clubs and wow. I think some people actually died as that.
Was anyone in your group injured?
Were there?
Was anyone in your group injured?
I don't think our small immediate group, but
Okay.
we could see it going on
You
all
could see it
around
going
us.
on. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine. I really can't imagine it. What did you do at that time? Were you angry? Did you pray? Did you just keep marching head straight ahead? What did that feel like?
We would pause from time to time for prayer, but basically we kept walking rather. We just felt that was our ministry, that we weren't going to stop. And again, it was a very mixed group, black and white, Jew and Gentile, Muslim, you name it. So that was our blind and visually impaired and visually blessed, all that. We just kept walking. That's what we felt Dr. King would want us to do.
Was Dr. King there?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, very much so. I think there was a senior Dr. King. Yeah,
His father?
his father. And I still remember being in that church, and he's basically begging us to come home, to go home.
Right.
Because we felt our ministry at that point was registering black voters. But one life is too many. This is a good cause, but Viola Lisa should not have been beaten up and should not have died.
She was a woman from Detroit who had come down, a white woman who had come down to help with registering voters and to help out with the march. And she was driving people back to Selma after the March on Washington.
Okay.
And in her car, there were black and white people together. And the car that Dave was in, there was a black young man that was driving, and there were black and white in that car. And the local people didn't like that. That
Not at
angered
all.
them. And it was a Ku Klux Klan member that shot her in the car when she was driving these people back and forth. It could have been, I mean, Dave was going down that same road, you know.
Sure.
So it was really terrible.
Did you have any moments of fear?
Fear? Absolutely. But I knew we were doing what she would be doing. I was terrified on the one hand, but absolutely driven. We're going to do this. I don't want Marge to be a widow. I don't want our kids to grow up with only a mother. But this is clearly what I must be about. He that is not with me is against me. So I don't think I've ever felt more clearly doing the right thing.
Marge, back at the home front in Michigan, what were you feeling?
I was feeling thankful that he was there and proud of him for being there and knowing that he was doing the right thing.
The kids were a little older by then. Did they have any understanding of what your family chose to do?
I have to think when that was, yeah, we were still in Detroit. 1963.
That might be a question for them, really, but
Right,
just from
right.
what you remember.
I really don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. No, I mean, you had a lot on your plate. You absolutely. And I know what kind of discussions did you have as a couple around these things?
I don't think there was conflict, was there?
No, there wasn't conflict. We really didn't, I don't think we discussed it very much.
Well, I think you were 100% supportive of me for doing it. I mean, obviously I didn't want her to be a widow with 3 young children. But she said, you know, you're doing the right thing, go ahead, it will work out.
You know, that I have tears in my eyes for the second time now. That just takes so much strength and integrity from both of you. I want to say thank you for doing what you did, to both of you. So, after that,
Sorry.
you moved on, no, praise God, actually. You moved on to Flint, and that is when, as I understand it, you had some people of color in the congregation, and maybe a few, right? But maybe a little more interracial dialogue in the church. Am I right about that? Tell me about that.
Well, as pastors, we came from a variety of denominations. You know, some Black Baptist congregations, White Baptist congregations. I think there was even a few Wisconsin Synod were very conservative, a few Missouri Synod, of course Presbyterian, Methodist, Episcopalian, Roman Catholic, straight, gay, male, female, you name it, it was a good mix. And we would get together, I think about once a week, usually a different composition of the group, and just try to understand each other and what's going on in our world. God said, or Jesus said, God, go into the world. Well, okay, what does that mean for us now in this particular context? It means that we're black and white, gay and straight, male and female, whatever variety we can find in the group, we'll converse with each other and try to understand each other.
This was within your church, or this was a interdenominational?
Oh, no, much more broad than that. Jew and Gentile, black and white. I don't know if the biggest divide was probably between the ULCA, United Lutheran Church in America, and the Wisconsin Synod, which is basically, we're right and you're wrong. Well, can I explain my position to you? No, I know you're wrong because you must disagree with me. And so we got along much better with our Jewish colleagues, our Missouri Synod. Well, Missouri Synod was pretty far to the right, but Presbyterian, Methodist, Episcopalian, again, conservative Jews, the whole gamut of religious perspectives.
Was there a name for this group?
I'm at
Interfaith Metropolitan Agency for Planning.
Okay.
And we basically said, what can we do together? Let's spend some time talking about our perspectives, our philosophies, our theology, but our basic emphasis, what can we do together? Should we pick it together, which we did.
Tell them about that picket. Elizabeth would be interested in hearing.
Which one?
They picketed at a performance of a Russian dance group at Whiting Auditorium, because at the time the Jews were being persecuted in Russia. And so that's something that they were doing to support the Jewish community. So he was a part of that group, and he was also a part of the Black Pastors Union, which was a group of black pastors that got together. Were you the only white pastor?
If there were more than one, I don't remember.
Yeah. But that was a way of finding, of sharing and getting to know each other and their perspectives.
Tell me a little more about that, how you became involved in that group. And I would assume maybe your experiences in Selma and Washington may have kind of influenced your thinking.
Well, there were neighbors.
Your neighbors? So one of the black pastors was a neighbor? Or?
Yeah, L. Rob.
Okay.
Well, Dixon.
And Herb Dixon. Yeah, these were our colleagues. They were nearby. We had different theological. The theological gap was much larger than the racial gap.
Okay.
I mean, the rapping, I don't think has a lot to do with what's going on inside of you. Although there were some negative experiences, basically within each group, not between us. There's a book by Roald Dahl called The Miracle Dialogue, and what he basically says is, let's listen to each other. 2 ears, 1 mouth. I spend twice as much time listening as we do talking.
Would these groups, I'm assuming IMAP and then the Black Pastors, would they meet on like a monthly basis, a regular basis?
Yeah, usually just once a month.
Okay.
Sometimes.
Would it be a meal or a meeting, or how would they do this?
We just basically went around to different church buildings,
Oh, okay.
and I remember we got together and said, "What's on your mind? What's on your heart?" Did some study, usually of scripture. Usually went off for lunch together, unless people from that congregation had prepared lunch for us. And usually by 1:30 or 2, we were on our way to do whatever we were doing in our lives.
What do you remember the Black Pastors focusing on then in those late 60s, maybe early 70s when you were there? What were the big burning issues? Because by then the civil rights had been signed into law in 1964, and there had been, by then unfortunately Dr. King had been shot.
Right.
There was a lot of political unrest in the U.S. with the Vietnam War, with President Nixon. What do you remember them focusing on at that point?
Basically, what can we do together? Let's talk about a little bit about who we are. Let's try to understand each other more and more. But then let's focus on what can we do? How can we act together? Should we picket? Should we? What can we do to proclaim through deeds the love of God? Let's not go and preach. Let's not go tell people you're wrong and you should. But let's see if there's a way we can affect the community. And so often it was just basically being there. We did not try to disrupt what was going on. People had paid good money to go to this event. We never tried to stop them from going in.
Are you talking about the ballet at this point, or you're talking about some other things as well?
Wherever they were going, whatever event was going on, we just tried to be there and represent. I don't like the word religious, but the religious perspective.
Would you have signs, or would you have brochures? How would you make yourselves
We
known?
would usually have some small signs,
Okay.
not shove it in your face.